The sun beat down mercilessly on the back of Vincent Zeller's neck as his horse stumbled over another patch of cracked earth, and that was when he saw her, a crumpled figure in faded calico beside a stone well that had clearly surrendered its last drop of water months ago. Vincent pulled hard on the reins, his throat tightening with alarm as he swung down from his saddle. The woman lay motionless, her dark hair spread across the dusty ground like a halo of midnight, her lips cracked and bleeding from the unforgiving New Mexico sun. He knelt beside her, his weathered hands surprisingly gentle as he checked for a pulse at her throat. It fluttered weakly beneath his fingertips, and relief flooded through him even as worry set his jaw tight. "Come on now," he murmured, sliding one arm beneath her shoulders and the other under her knees. She was lighter than he expected, her body already showing signs of dehydration. He lifted her against his chest and carried her to where his horse waited patiently. The animal, a sturdy buckskin gelding named Copper, stood steady as Vincent maneuvered the unconscious woman onto the saddle. He climbed up behind her, cradling her against his chest as he turned Copper toward the creek he knew lay about 2 miles west. The ride felt eternal. Vincent kept one arm wrapped securely around the woman's waist, while the other hand held the reins. Her head lolled against his shoulder, and he could feel how her breathing came shallow and labored. He urged Copper into a faster walk, though not so fast as to jostle her too severely. Every few minutes he glanced down at her pale face, willing her to hold on just a little longer. When they finally reached the creek, Vincent dismounted with practiced efficiency and carried her to a spot where cottonwood trees offered blessed shade. He laid her carefully on the grass beside the water, then pulled his canteen from his saddle. Kneeling beside her, he lifted her head gently and tilted the canteen to let just a few drops pass through her cracked lips. "Easy there," he said softly. "Not too much at once." She stirred at the touch of water, her eyelids fluttering. Vincent continued to give her small amounts, watching as color slowly began to return to her cheeks. After several minutes, her eyes finally opened, revealing irises the color of honey in sunlight. She stared up at him in confusion, her gaze unfocused. "Where?" she whispered, her voice barely audible. "By the creek, about 8 miles west of Placitas," Vincent said. "I found you by that old dried well. How long were you out there?" She tried to sit up, but he placed a steadying hand on her shoulder. "Take it slow. You have been under that sun for quite some time, from the looks of it." "My wagon," she said, her eyes widening with sudden panic. "My things. Everything I own." "Where is it?" "I do not know." Tears welled in her eyes and she looked away, embarrassed by her own weakness. "I was traveling to Placitas to meet my aunt. The wagon wheel broke about 10 miles back, maybe more. My horse bolted when a rattlesnake spooked him. I tried to walk, found that well, and thought there would be water." Vincent wet his bandana in the creek and gently wiped her face, washing away the dust and grime. "What is your name?" "Lila. Lila Garrett." She accepted another small drink from his canteen. "Thank you for finding me. I thought I was going to die out there." "Vincent Zeller," he said, settling back on his heels. "And you very nearly did." Another hour or two in that heat without water would have been the end. Lila studied his face, taking in the strong jaw shadowed with stubble, the deep brown eyes that held both kindness and something harder, something forged by years in this unforgiving land. He looked to be in his late 20s, perhaps 30, with sun-bronzed skin and calloused hands that spoke of a life spent working under open skies. "I need to find my wagon," she said, attempting once more to sit up. This time, Vincent helped her, keeping a supportive hand at her back until she found her balance. "Everything I have is in it. Papers, money, clothes, a photograph of my mother." "You are in no condition to go anywhere right now," Vincent said firmly. "You need rest and water and food. Once you have had some time to recover, I will help you look for your wagon." "But someone might find it first. They could take everything." "That is a risk," Vincent admitted, "but it is a bigger risk for you to collapse again out there. Tell you what, you stay here in the shade, drink water, and I will ride back along the trail and see if I can spot your wagon. Would that suit you?" Lila hesitated, then nodded. "You would do that for a stranger?" "Cannot very well leave you to worry yourself sick about it," Vincent said with a slight smile. "Besides, it is the right thing to do." He helped her get more comfortable against the trunk of a cottonwood tree, made sure she had the canteen and a strip of jerky from his saddlebag, then mounted Copper and rode east. Lila watched him go, feeling a strange mixture of gratitude and something else she could not quite name. He was unlike any man she had encountered during her journey west from Kansas. There was a quiet strength about him, a natural authority that came not from arrogance but from deep confidence. Vincent followed the main trail for several miles before cutting south where he thought someone on foot might have wandered. The afternoon sun continued its relentless assault, and he pulled his hat lower over his eyes as he scanned the landscape. About an hour into his search, he spotted the wagon, tilted at an awkward angle with its broken wheel jutting out like a fractured bone. He approached cautiously, relieved to see that scavengers had not yet found it. The wagon bed still held several trunks and boxes, all secured with rope. Vincent dismounted and began the work of unhitching the remaining horse's traces, though the animal itself was long gone. He examined the broken wheel, noting that it would need serious repair or replacement before the wagon could move again. Making a decision, he secured what he could of Lila's belongings onto Copper, prioritizing what looked like personal items and anything valuable. The heavier trunks would have to wait. He would need to return with a spare horse or arrange for someone from Placidus to help retrieve the rest. By the time he made it back to the creek, the sun was beginning its descent toward the horizon, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink. Lila stood as he approached, looking stronger already, though worry clouded her features. "I found it," Vincent called out as he drew near. "About 12 miles southeast. I brought what I could carry." Relief transformed her face. "Thank you. Oh, thank you so much." He unloaded her things, and Lila immediately began sorting through them, her hands trembling as she found a small leather-bound photograph case. She opened it, and her expression softened as she gazed at the image inside. "My mother," she said quietly. "She died 2 years ago. This is all I have left of her." Vincent nodded, understanding the weight of such loss. "I'm sorry. That's a hard thing." "She always wanted to see the West," Lila said, closing the case carefully. "She used to tell me stories about mountains that touched the sky and rivers that ran clear as glass. After she passed, I decided I would come here for both of us. That is a brave thing, making that journey alone." "My aunt is supposed to be in Placidus," Lila explained. "My mother's sister. I have not seen her since I was a child, but she wrote and invited me to come stay with her. Said she runs a boarding house there." "What is her name? I might know her. Placidus is not a large town." "Margaret Garrett. Well, it was Garrett. She might have married since the last letter." Vincent shook his head. "Cannot say I know the name, but I do not spend much time in town proper. I have a ranch about 5 miles north of Placidus. Raise cattle mostly, some horses." They fell into companionable conversation as the evening deepened. Vincent built a small fire and set about making a simple meal of beans and cornbread. Lila protested that he had already done too much, but he waved off her concerns with the same quiet authority he had shown earlier. "You need to eat," he said simply. "Get your strength back." As they ate, Lila found herself relaxing in Vincent's presence. He spoke little about himself, instead asking her questions about her life in Kansas, her decision to come west, her hopes for the future. She told him about the small farm where she had grown up, about her father who had died when she was young, about working as a seamstress to help her mother make ends meet. "I want something different," she admitted, "something more than just surviving day to day. I want to build something real, something that lasts." "That is what this land offers," Vincent said, staring into the fire. "If you are strong enough to take it and hold on to it, it does not give anything easily." "You sound like you speak from experience." "I came here 6 years ago with nothing but a horse and a rifle," Vincent said. "Built my ranch from the ground up. There have been hard times, droughts, rustlers, winters that killed half my herd. But I have made something. It is mine, and that means everything." Lila heard the pride in his voice, the deep satisfaction of a man who had carved out his place in the world through sheer determination. She found herself admiring him, not just for his kindness in helping her, but for the strength of character he embodied. When full darkness fell, Vincent insisted that Lila take his bedroll while he kept watch by the fire. She was too exhausted to argue much, and within minutes of lying down, she fell into a deep, dreamless sleep. Vincent sat with his back against a tree, his rifle across his lap, watching the flames dance and listening to the night sounds of the New Mexico wilderness. He thought about the woman sleeping nearby, about the twist of fate that had led him to find her. Another hour, he kept thinking. Another hour, and she would have been beyond saving. The next morning dawned clear and bright. Vincent woke Lila gently, and they shared a breakfast of coffee and the remaining cornbread. Once they had packed up, Vincent helped Lila mount Copper, then swung up behind her. She stiffened at first, unused to such close proximity to a man, but Vincent kept his touch respectful, his hands steady on the reins. "We will head into Placitas," he said. "Find your aunt and get you settled. Then I will arrange to have your wagon and the rest of your things brought in." The ride took about 2 hours. Lila found herself acutely aware of Vincent's presence behind her, the solid warmth of his chest at her back, the strength in the arms that bracketed her sides. She felt safe in a way she had not experienced since her father was alive, and that realization both comforted and unsettled her. Placitas appeared on the horizon as a cluster of adobe buildings nestled in a valley between rust-colored hills. It was smaller than Lila had imagined, perhaps 24 structures in all, with a main street that ran like a dusty ribbon through the center of town. As they rode in, several people stopped to stare at them with open curiosity. Vincent guided Copper to a stop in front of the general store. He dismounted first, then reached up to help Lila down. His hands spanned her waist easily, and for a moment their eyes met and held before Lila looked away, feeling heat rise in her cheeks that had nothing to do with the sun. "Wait here," Vincent said. "I will ask inside about your aunt." He disappeared into the store, leaving Lila standing in the street feeling suddenly self-conscious. Her dress was dusty and wrinkled from her ordeal, her hair likely a tangled mess despite her efforts to braid it that morning. She smoothed her hands over her skirt uselessly, trying to make herself presentable. Vincent emerged a few minutes later, his expression neutral. "The shopkeeper says there is a boarding house at the end of the street, run by a woman named Margaret Thorne. He thinks that might be your aunt." They walked together, Vincent leading Copper by the reins with Lila's belongings still tied to the saddle. The boarding house was a 2-story adobe building with a covered porch and flower boxes at the windows. Before they could knock, the door swung open and a woman in her 40s stepped out, her face lighting up with recognition. "Lila? Is that you? Oh, my stars, child, you look just like your mother did at your age." Lila felt tears spring to her eyes as her aunt pulled her into a fierce embrace. "Aunt Margaret, I am so glad to have found you." Margaret held her at arm's length, taking in her disheveled appearance with concern. "What happened to you? You look like you have been through an ordeal." "She nearly died of thirst out by the old Peter's well," Vincent said quietly. "Her wagon broke down, and she got stranded." Margaret's hand flew to her mouth. "Good heavens! Lila, you must come inside at once. You need rest and a proper meal." She turned to Vincent, her eyes warm with gratitude. "And you must be the one who saved her. Please, come in. Let me thank you properly." "There is no need," Vincent said. "I only did what anyone would have done." "Nonsense, you saved my niece's life. That deserves more than just words of thanks. Please, at least let me feed you a proper dinner." Vincent glanced at Lila, who gave him a small, hopeful smile. Something in that look made his decision easy. "All right. Thank you, madam." Margaret ushered them inside, calling out instructions to her hired girl to prepare the guest room and heat water for a bath. The boarding house was clean and welcoming, with simple but comfortable furnishings and the smell of fresh bread coming from the kitchen. "Now then," Margaret said once she had gotten Lila settled in a chair with a glass of water, "tell me everything that happened." Lila recounted her journey, the broken wheel, her desperate search for water. Vincent filled in the parts she could not remember, describing how he had found her unconscious by the well. Margaret listened with growing alarm, shaking her head. "You could have died out there," she said, gripping Lila's hand tightly. "Thank God Mr. Zeller was riding that way." "I need to get the rest of my things," Lila said. "The wagon is still out there with most of my trunks." "I can take care of that," Vincent offered. "I will ride back out with a spare horse tomorrow and bring everything in. Your wagon will need repairs before it can be moved, but I can arrange for that too." "You have already done so much," Lila protested. "I cannot ask you to do more." "You are not asking. I am offering." Vincent's tone was gentle but firm. Besides, I need to check on my own cattle in that area anyway. It is not out of my way. Margaret smiled at him with approval. You are a good man, Mr. Zeller. It is clear as day. Over the next few hours, Lila bathed and changed into clean clothes while Margaret prepared a substantial meal. When they all sat down to eat together, the conversation flowed easily. Margaret wanted to know everything about Lila's life in Kansas, and Lila found herself laughing as she shared stories about her childhood. Vincent contributed less to the conversation, content to listen, but when he did speak, his words carried weight. As the evening drew to a close, Vincent prepared to leave. Lila walked him to the door, suddenly reluctant to see him go. Thank you again, she said, for everything. I truly do not know how I can ever repay you. No repayment needed, Vincent said, settling his hat on his head. I'm just glad I came along when I did. He paused, then added, I will be back tomorrow with your things. Will you stay for dinner again? The words came out before Lila could stop them, and she felt herself blush. I mean, Aunt Margaret would want to thank you properly, I'm sure. Vincent's lips curved into a slight smile. If the invitation is open, I would be glad to accept. It is, Lila said softly. After Vincent left, Margaret gave her niece a knowing look. He's a fine man, that one. Handsome, too. Aunt Margaret, Lila protested, but she could not stop the smile that tugged at her lips. I am just saying what I see, Margaret said with a laugh. And what I see is a good, decent man who looks at you like you are something precious. That is not something to dismiss lightly out here. Good men are rarer than gold. Lila thought about Vincent all night, lying in her comfortable bed in her aunt's boarding house. She kept remembering the gentleness in his hands as he had given her water, the solid strength of him on the ride to town, the way his eyes had held hers before he left. She barely knew him, and yet she felt drawn to him in a way she had never experienced before. True to his word, Vincent returned the next day with Lila's remaining belongings. He had enlisted the help of a man from town, and together they brought in all her trunks and made arrangements for the wagon to be repaired at the livery stable. Lila watched from the porch as Vincent worked, noting the easy way he moved, the competence in everything he did. When the work was done, Margaret insisted Vincent stay for dinner again. This time, Lila helped her aunt in the kitchen, and they prepared a meal of roasted chicken, potatoes, and apple pie. Other boarders joined them at the table, and the conversation was lively, but Lila found her attention continually drawn to Vincent, and more than once she caught him looking at her too. After dinner, when the others had dispersed to their rooms or the parlor, Vincent asked Lila if she would like to take a walk. Margaret gave her an encouraging nod, and Lila accepted, her heart beating faster than it should have been for such a simple invitation. They walked slowly down the main street of Placitas as the sun set, painting the sky in brilliant shades of purple and gold. For a while, neither spoke, but the silence was comfortable, not awkward. How are you feeling? Vincent finally asked. Recovered from your ordeal? Much better, thanks to you, Lila said. Aunt Margaret has been wonderful. The room is comfortable, the food is good. I feel very fortunate. What will you do now? Will you stay here in Placitas? I think so, Lila said thoughtfully. I've been thinking about setting up a dressmaking business. There are not many options for women out here who want proper clothing. I could do well, I think. I think you could too, Vincent said. You have come all this way. Seems a shame not to make something of it. They had reached the edge of town, where the buildings gave way to open land. Vincent stopped and looked out over the landscape, now shadowed in the gathering dusk. This country gets in your blood, he said quietly. Once you have been here long enough, nowhere else feels like home. It is hard and unforgiving, but it is honest. It does not pretend to be anything other than what it is. Is that why you stayed? Lila asked. After you first came here? Part of it. I also had nowhere else to go. No family, no ties to anywhere particular. Figured I might as well build something here as anywhere else. He turned to look at her, his expression serious. But lately I have been thinking that building something is easier if you are not alone. Lila's breath caught. What do you mean? I mean that I found you by that well 2 days ago, and I have not stopped thinking about you since. Vincent took a step closer, his voice dropping lower. I know that is fast. I know we barely know each other. But something about you, Lila Garrett, has gotten under my skin. I have been thinking about you too, Lila admitted, her voice barely above a whisper. You saved my life, but it is more than gratitude. When I am near you, I feel safe. I feel like myself." Vincent reached out slowly, giving her time to pull away if she wanted. When she did not, he cupped her face gently with one hand, his thumb brushing her cheek. "I would like to call on you properly, court you if you will have me." "Yes," Lila breathed, "I would like that very much." The first kiss was soft, tentative, a question and an answer all at once. When they pulled apart, Vincent rested his forehead against hers, and Lila felt her heart swell with something that felt dangerously close to love. Over the following weeks, Vincent became a regular presence in Placitas. He would ride in several times a week, sometimes on the pretense of business, but everyone knew he was really coming to see Lila. They would take long walks together, talking about everything and nothing. Vincent told her about his ranch, about his dreams of expanding his herd, about the satisfaction of watching something grow from nothing. Lila shared her own dreams, her plans for her dressmaking business, her hopes for a future in this wild, beautiful land. Margaret watched their growing attachment with approval and gave them her blessing. The other townspeople, initially curious about the relationship, soon came to accept it as natural and right. Vincent Zeller was well respected, known as an honest man and a hard worker, and Lila quickly won people over with her kindness and skill with a needle. 6 weeks after Vincent had found her by the well, Lila opened her dressmaking shop in a small room attached to the general store. The shopkeeper, a kindly man named Thomas who had known Margaret for years, gave her a good rate on the rent. Within days, Lila had her first customers, women grateful for the chance to have clothes that fit properly and looked attractive. Vincent helped her set up the shop, building shelves and a counter with his own hands. Lila watched him work, marveling at how natural it felt to have him in her life, as if he had always been there and always would be. One evening, as they sat together on the porch of the boarding house watching the stars emerge in the darkening sky, Vincent took Lila's hand. "Come out to my ranch tomorrow," he said. "I want you to see it. I want you to see what I have built." "I would love to," Lila said, squeezing his hand. The next day, Vincent arrived with a gentle mare for Lila to ride. They set out early before the full heat of the day, riding north through landscape that took Lila's breath away. The hills rolled like frozen waves, covered in scrub brush and dotted with juniper trees. In the distance, mountains rose purple against the blue sky. Vincent's ranch appeared as they crested a hill. It was modest but well maintained, with a sturdy house built of adobe and timber, a barn, and several corrals. Cattle grazed on the range beyond, and Lila could see why Vincent took such pride in what he had created. It represented years of hard work and determination. "This is beautiful," Lila said as they dismounted. "You have done something remarkable here, Vincent." He showed her around, pointing out improvements he had made, explaining his plans for the future. The house was simple inside, with a large main room that served as kitchen and living area, and 2 smaller rooms off the back. It was clean but sparse, furnished with only the necessities. "It needs a woman's touch," Vincent admitted, looking around with a critical eye. "I built it for function, not beauty." "It has good bones," Lila said, already imagining curtains at the windows, a rug on the floor, perhaps some plants in pots. "It could be very comfortable with some small changes." They spent the afternoon together, and Vincent made them lunch. Afterward, they sat on the porch that wrapped around the front of the house, and Vincent pointed out landmarks, telling her the names of distant mountains and describing the layout of his land. "I have 500 acres," he said, "enough to support a good-sized herd. There's water year-round from the creek that runs through the north section. It is not the biggest ranch in New Mexico, but it is mine. Every fence post, every building, I put it here with my own hands." "You should be proud," Lila said. "I am proud of you." Vincent turned to look at her, his expression intense. "Lila, I need to tell you something, need to ask you something." Her heart began to race. "What is it?" "When I found you by that well, my life was simple. Lonely, maybe, but simple. I had my work, my ranch, and that was enough. But now you are here and everything has changed. I do not want to go back to being alone. I do not want to spend my evenings in this house with no one to talk to, no one to share things with." He stood and pulled her gently to her feet, taking both her hands in his. "I know it has only been 2 months," he continued. "I know people might say it is too soon, but out here, when you find something good, you do not let it slip away. Lila Garrett, I am in love with you. Will you marry me?" Tears sprang to Lila's eyes, but they were tears of joy. "Yes," she said, her voice trembling with emotion. "Yes, Vincent, I will marry you. I love you too." He pulled her into his arms, holding her tightly, and Lila felt as though every hard thing she had endured, every loss and disappointment, had led her to this moment. She thought of her mother, who had always wanted to see the West but never got the chance. In a way, Lila was living that dream for both of them now. They were married 3 weeks later in a simple ceremony at the church in Placidus. Margaret cried happy tears and helped Lila make a beautiful dress of cream-colored silk. The whole town turned out for the wedding, and the celebration lasted well into the evening, with music and dancing and more food than Lila had ever seen in one place. When Vincent carried her over the threshold of the ranch house that night, Lila felt a profound sense of coming home. This place, this life, this man, they were hers now, and she was theirs. Together, they would build something that would last. The first months of marriage were an adjustment. Lila learned the rhythms of ranch life, the early mornings and hard work, the way the weather dictated everything. Vincent was patient with her, teaching her about cattle and horses, showing her how to read the land. She brought beauty to their home, sewing curtains and quilts, planting a garden near the house. In the evenings, they would sit together and talk about their days, about their plans, about the future they were creating together. Lila continued her dressmaking business, riding into town twice a week to work in her shop. The extra income helped, especially when Vincent needed to make improvements to the ranch. But more than that, it gave Lila something that was her own, a way to contribute beyond the domestic work of running the household. Their first winter together was mild by New Mexico standards, but it still tested them. Several heavy snows came, and there were days when Vincent could not make it back to the house before dark, when Lila would pace and worry until she finally heard his horse outside. But they weathered it together, growing closer through each challenge. Spring brought new calves and longer days. Vincent hired a young man named Peter to help with the ranch work, and having the extra hands meant Vincent had more time to spend with Lila. They would take rides together in the evenings, exploring their land, watching the sunset paint the landscape in gold and crimson. One evening in late spring, as they sat on the porch watching the stars emerge, Lila told Vincent she was expecting a child. His face transformed with joy, and he pulled her into his arms, his happiness evident in every line of his body. "A baby," he said wonderingly. "We are going to have a baby." "Are you happy?" Lila asked, though she already knew the answer from his expression. "Happy does not even begin to cover it," Vincent said, his hand coming to rest gently on her still flat stomach. "You have given me everything, Lila. A home, a family, a reason to build something bigger than just myself." The pregnancy progressed smoothly. Margaret came to stay at the ranch during the last month, wanting to be there to help when the baby came. Vincent fussed over Lila constantly, worried about her doing too much, which he found both endearing and occasionally frustrating. Their son was born on a warm September evening, arriving with a lusty cry that announced his presence to the world. Vincent held the baby with shaking hands, tears streaming down his face as he looked at the tiny life they had created together. "What should we name him?" Lila asked, exhausted but happy as she watched her husband cradle their son. "I was thinking Matthew," Vincent said, "after my father. He died when I was young, but he was a good man. I would like to honor him." "Matthew Zeller," Lila said, testing the name. "I like it. It suits him." Margaret stayed for another 2 weeks, helping Lila adjust to motherhood and making sure the household ran smoothly while Lila recovered. Vincent hired a woman from town, Mrs. Chen, to come help with cooking and cleaning a few days a week, insisting that Lila needed to rest and bond with the baby. Watching Vincent with their son filled Lila with a love so deep it sometimes took her breath away. He was gentle and attentive, changing diapers and walking the floor with Matthew when he fussed. In the evenings, he would sit in the rocking chair by the fireplace, the baby asleep on his chest, and Lila would watch them and think about how far they had both come. The first year of Matthew's life passed in a blur of sleepless nights and profound joy. The baby grew strong and healthy, hitting all his milestones right on schedule. Vincent's ranch continued to prosper. He had expanded his herd and was earning a reputation for raising quality cattle. Lila's dressmaking business remained steady, though she worked less now that she had Matthew to care for. On the first anniversary of their wedding, Vincent gave Lila a beautiful necklace, a simple silver chain with a small turquoise pendant. "Turquoise is the stone of this land," he said as he fastened it around her neck. "I wanted you to have something that represents what we have built here together." Lila traced the stone with her fingertips, moved by the thoughtfulness of the gift. "It is perfect. Thank you." They celebrated quietly that evening after putting Matthew to bed, dancing slowly in their living room to music only they could hear. Vincent held her close, and Lila thought about the woman she had been a year ago, desperate and dying by a dried-up well. That woman could never have imagined this life, this happiness. "What are you thinking about?" Vincent asked, reading the emotion on her face. "About how lucky I am," Lila said. "About how you saved my life in more ways than one." "I am the lucky one," Vincent insisted. "Finding you was the best thing that ever happened to me." 2 years after Matthew was born, Lila found herself pregnant again. This time, a daughter arrived in the spring, tiny and perfect with a cap of dark hair like her mother's. They named her Sarah, and Matthew, now a sturdy toddler, was fascinated by his baby sister. The ranch continued to grow. Vincent hired more men to help with the work, and they built additional corrals and a larger barn. Lila's garden expanded each year, producing vegetables that she preserved and stored for the winter months. Life was full and busy, but it was good. When Matthew was 5 and Sarah was 3, Vincent and Lila sat down one evening after the children were in bed and talked about the future. "I have been thinking," Vincent said, "about expanding beyond just cattle. Maybe getting some horses, breeding them. There is good money in horses if you do it right." "Do you think we could manage it?" Lila asked. "With everything else we have going on?" "I think so. We would need to build another barn, and I would need to hire at least one more hand who knows horses, but I believe we could make it work." Lila considered it. "Then let us do it. You have good instincts about these things. I trust your judgment." Vincent reached across the table and took her hand. "We make a good team, you and I." "The best team," Lila agreed. They acquired their first breeding horses the following year, 2 mares and a stallion of good bloodlines. Vincent threw himself into learning everything he could about horse breeding, consulting with other ranchers and reading every book on the subject he could get his hands on. The first foals were born the next spring, healthy and strong, and Vincent's gamble seemed to be paying off. Matthew grew into a bright, curious child who followed his father everywhere, asking endless questions about the ranch and the animals. Sarah was quieter, more thoughtful, but she had a way with the horses that surprised everyone. Even as a small child, she could calm a skittish animal with just her presence. When Matthew was 7, he started school in Placitas. Lila would drive him into town in the wagon 3 days a week, and she used those trips to work in her dressmaking shop, which she had kept all these years. Sarah would play in the back room while Lila sewed, content with her dolls and picture books. Life fell into a comfortable rhythm. The ranch prospered year after year. Vincent's reputation grew, and people came from all over New Mexico to buy his horses. Lila's business also thrived. She had trained 2 other women in Placitas in dressmaking, and together they could handle more orders than Lila had ever managed alone. One evening, when Matthew was 10 and Sarah was 8, a terrible drought struck the region. The creek that ran through Vincent's property, which had never failed in all the years he had owned the land, began to run low. Vincent watched it with growing concern, rationing water for the animals and praying for rain that did not come. The drought lasted 3 months, the longest, hottest summer anyone could remember. Vincent worked himself to exhaustion, hauling water from deeper wells, moving cattle to areas where there was still some grass. Lila helped however she could, and even the children pitched in, understanding the seriousness of the situation. Finally, in late August, the rains came. Not just a sprinkle, but a deluge that lasted for 2 days straight. Vincent stood in the rain, his face turned up to the sky, letting the water wash over him. When he came back to the house, soaking wet and grinning, Lila threw her arms around him despite his muddy clothes. "We made it," he said. "We survived." "We always will," Lila said with conviction, "as long as we have each other." The drought had been hard, but it had also proven to Vincent and Lila that they could weather anything together. Their bond, already strong, became unbreakable. As the children grew older, the ranch became more of a family operation. Matthew, now in his teens, took on real responsibilities, working alongside the hired hands. Sarah proved to have a remarkable gift with horses, training them with patience and intuition beyond her years. Vincent watched his children with pride, knowing that what he had built would continue after he was gone. Lila, now in her 30s, had aged gracefully. The harsh New Mexico sun had added some lines to her face, but Vincent thought she was more beautiful than ever. She moved with confidence now, comfortable in this life they had built together. The uncertain young woman he had found by the well had transformed into a strong, capable woman who ran their household with efficiency and warmth. One evening, as they sat on their porch watching the sunset, something they had done countless times over the years, Vincent pulled Lila close. "Do you ever regret it?" he asked. "Coming west? Marrying me? This life?" Lila looked at him in surprise. Never. Not for a single moment. Why would you ask that?" "Because it has been hard sometimes," Vincent said. "The drought, the lean years, the times when money was tight. I sometimes wonder if you would have been happier with an easier life." "This is the life I chose," Lila said firmly. "You are the man I chose, and I would choose you again every single day. You saved me, Vincent, not just from dying in the desert, but from a life that was small and limited. You gave me adventure and love and children and a home. You gave me everything." Vincent kissed her then, a kiss that held all the love and gratitude he felt. "I am the one who should be grateful. You made me whole, Lila. Before you, I was just going through the motions. After you, I finally understood what I was working for." They sat together as the stars came out, holding hands the way they had done since the beginning. Inside the house, they could hear Matthew and Sarah arguing good-naturedly about something, and the sound made them both smile. "We did good," Vincent said softly. "We did very good," Lila agreed. Years continued to pass, bringing both joys and sorrows. Margaret passed away peacefully in her sleep when Lila was 38, and Lila grieved deeply for the aunt who had taken her in and supported her. But she took comfort in knowing that Margaret had lived to see her niece happy and settled with a family of her own. Matthew, at 19, announced his intention to attend university in Santa Fe to study engineering. It was a bittersweet moment for Vincent and Lila. They were proud of his ambition, but the thought of him leaving the ranch, even temporarily, was difficult. "I will come back," Matthew assured them. "I'm not leaving for good. I just want to learn more, bring new ideas back to the ranch. We could do so much more with some modern engineering." "Your father and I support you," Lila said, though her voice was thick with emotion. "Always." Sarah, now 17, had no interest in leaving. She had already made it clear that her future was with the horses. She had a talent that could not be taught, and word had spread. People brought her their most difficult horses, and she worked miracles with them. One afternoon, a young man named Daniel arrived at the ranch with a horse that had been abused by its previous owner. The animal was wild-eyed and dangerous, lashing out at anyone who came near. Sarah spent weeks working with that horse, using patience and gentleness, never raising her voice or her hand. Vincent watched his daughter work and saw echoes of Lila in her, the same quiet strength, the same refusal to give up. The young man, Daniel, kept coming back to check on the horse, but Vincent suspected the animal was not his only interest. He saw the way Daniel looked at Sarah, the way she blushed when he was around. Vincent was not thrilled about the idea of his daughter courting, but he had to admit Daniel seemed like a decent young man. "He's going to ask permission to court her," Lila said one evening, having noticed the same things Vincent had. "I know," Vincent said with a sigh. "She's growing up. I cannot stop it, no matter how much I might want to." "No," Lila agreed, squeezing his hand, "but we raised her right. She will make good choices." Daniel did ask permission, and Vincent gave it, though not without a stern conversation about his expectations. Sarah and Daniel's courtship was sweet and proper, conducted mostly at the ranch where Vincent and Lila could keep an eye on things. After a year, Daniel proposed, and Sarah accepted with joy. The wedding was held at the ranch, a bigger affair than Vincent and Lila's simple ceremony had been. Matthew came home from university for it, and the whole town of Placitas turned out. As Vincent walked his daughter down the makeshift aisle they had set up in the yard, he felt tears prick his eyes. His little girl, The baby he had held in his arms was now a woman starting her own life. After the wedding, Daniel moved to the ranch to work alongside Vincent and Sarah. He was a hard worker and a good man, and Vincent grew to appreciate him. Within a year, Sarah announced she was pregnant, and Vincent and Lila found themselves preparing to be grandparents. "How did we get to be old enough for grandchildren?" Lila asked with a laugh one evening. "I do not feel old," Vincent said, "not when I'm with you." Their first grandchild, a boy named James, was born healthy and strong. Holding that baby in his arms, Vincent was transported back to the day Matthew was born, to the overwhelming flood of love and responsibility he had felt. Now, as a grandfather, he felt it all over again, but tempered with the wisdom of years. Matthew returned from university with a degree and a head full of ideas for improving the ranch. He worked with Vincent to implement new systems for water management and to design more efficient buildings. Father and son worked side by side, and Vincent took deep satisfaction in passing on his knowledge and learning new things from his son. When Vincent was 55 and Lila was 52, Vincent began to think about slowing down. His body, worn by years of hard labor, was starting to protest. His joints ached in the mornings, and he tired more easily than he used to. He did not want to admit it, but Lila could see it. "You have worked hard enough," she told him one evening. "Matthew and Daniel can handle more of the physical work. You can focus on management, on the business side of things." "I do not know how to not work," Vincent admitted. "It is who I am." "You are more than your work," Lila said gently. "You are a husband, a father, a grandfather. You are the man who built something from nothing and raised a family in this hard land. You have nothing left to prove." Vincent considered her words and slowly began to step back from the day-to-day operations of the ranch. It was harder than he expected, learning to trust others with work he had always done himself. But Matthew proved to be more than capable, and Daniel's dedication never wavered. Sarah continued her work with the horses, now with young James toddling around the barn, already showing signs of his mother's gift. With more free time, Vincent and Lila took long rides together like they had in the early days of their marriage. They would pack a lunch and spend the day exploring their land, reminiscing about all they had been through together. "Remember when you found me by that well?" Lila asked one afternoon as they sat by the creek that ran through their property. "I was so close to dying." "I remember," Vincent said. "I remember thinking you were the most beautiful thing I had ever seen, even half dead from thirst." Lila laughed. "I must have looked terrible." "You looked like someone worth saving," Vincent said seriously. "And you were. You are." They sat in comfortable silence, watching the water flow past. It had been over 30 years since that day, over 30 years of building a life together. They had weathered droughts and hard winters, financial struggles and personal losses. They had raised 2 children who had grown into good people. They had created something lasting. "If I could go back," Lila said softly, "and choose any path for my life, I would choose this one again. Every time." "Even the hard parts?" Vincent asked. "Especially the hard parts," Lila said, "because they made us stronger. They taught us what we are capable of, and they made the good times that much sweeter." Vincent pulled her close, and they sat together by the water, 2 people who had found each other against all odds and built something beautiful in the wilderness. As they grew older, Vincent and Lila took on the role of matriarchs and patriarchs of their family. Sarah had 2 more children, daughters named Emma and Grace. Matthew eventually married a teacher from Santa Fe, a smart, kind woman named Catherine, and they had a son named Vincent after his grandfather. The ranch continued to prosper under Matthew's management, incorporating new techniques and technologies while maintaining the core values Vincent had instilled from the beginning. The Zeller name became well known and respected throughout New Mexico. When people spoke of the family, they spoke of integrity, hard work, and quality livestock. On their 40th anniversary, the whole family gathered at the ranch for a celebration. All 5 grandchildren were there, along with Matthew and Catherine, Sarah and Daniel, and several old friends from town. As Vincent looked around at all the faces, at the family he and Lila had created, he felt a profound sense of accomplishment. That evening, after everyone else had gone to bed, Vincent and Lila sat on their porch one more time. It was a clear night. the stars brilliant in the New Mexico sky. 40 years, Lila said wonderingly. It feels like both forever and no time at all. Time is strange that way, Vincent agreed, but I would not trade a single moment. Not even the time I yelled at you for tracking mud through the house after I had just cleaned? Lila asked with a smile. Not even then, Vincent said, laughing, though you were terrifying. They sat quietly for a while, and then Lila said, Do you remember what you said to me the night you proposed? You said that when you find something good out here, you do not let it slip away. I remember. That has been the truth of our life together, Lila said. We found each other and we held on tight. Through everything, we held on. And we always will, Vincent said, taking her hand. They watched the stars wheel slowly across the sky. Two people who had loved each other for 4 decades, who had built a legacy that would continue long after they were gone. The ranch house behind them held their family, their future. The land around them held their history, their struggles and triumphs. Vincent thought about the man he had been, riding alone across the desert all those years ago. He thought about the moment he had seen Lila lying by that well, about the decision to stop, to help, to care. That single moment had changed everything. Thank you, he said suddenly. For what? Lila asked. For saying yes, for taking a chance on a lonely cowboy with more dreams than sense, for building this life with me. Thank you for finding me, Lila said, for carrying me to water and shade, for showing me what love really means. They kissed then, a kiss that held 40 years of love and partnership, of shared struggles and joys. When they pulled apart, they remained close, foreheads touching, hands clasped. I love you, Vincent whispered. I love you too, Lila replied, always and forever. The years continued to pass with gentle inevitability. Vincent's hair turned completely white, and Lila's developed streaks of silver that she wore with pride. Their bodies showed the wear of hard living, but their spirits remained strong. They took joy in their grandchildren, watching them grow and develop their own personalities and talents. When Vincent was 68, he had a health scare that reminded them both of their mortality. It turned out to be nothing serious, but it prompted conversations about the future, about what would happen to the ranch when they were gone. Matthew has been running things for years already, Vincent said as they discussed their plans. He should have it officially. The ranch should stay in the family, keep the Zeller name. I agree, Lila said, but we should make sure Sarah and her family are taken care of too. They have worked just as hard. They consulted with a lawyer and drew up papers that divided the ranch between their children while keeping it as a single operating unit. Matthew would have majority control, but Sarah and Daniel would own their portion outright and continue their horse breeding operation. It was fair and equitable, and both children were satisfied with the arrangement. With their affairs in order, Vincent and Lila settled into a peaceful old age. They spent their days doing light work around the ranch, playing with their grandchildren, and enjoying each other's company. In the evenings, they would still sit on their porch, watching the sunset, talking about their lives. Do you think we did right by our children? Vincent asked one evening. It was a question that had been on his mind lately. Look at them, Lila said, gesturing toward the barn where Matthew and Sarah were working together on some project. They are good people, kind, hard-working, honorable. Yes, we did right by them. I worry I was too hard sometimes, Vincent admitted. Expected too much. You expected what they were capable of giving, Lila said firmly, and you taught them the value of effort and integrity. Those are gifts, Vincent, not burdens. On their 50th anniversary, the family threw a massive celebration. Nearly 200 people attended, from Placitas and beyond. The governor of New Mexico even sent a letter of congratulations, acknowledging the Zeller family's contributions to the state's ranching industry. Vincent gave a speech that night, his voice still strong despite his years. 50 years ago, I found a woman lying by a dried-up well. She was close to death, and I was close to giving up on ever finding someone to share my life with. But I stopped. I helped her, and in doing so, I saved my own life as much as hers. He looked at Lila, seated at the head table, tears streaming down her face. Everything good in my life stems from that moment. My wife, my children, my grandchildren, this ranch, all of it. So I want to say thank you, Lila, for being the woman worth saving, for being the woman who saved me right back." There was not a dry eye in the house. People clapped and cheered, and Lila stood to embrace her husband, holding him tight as the celebration continued around them. That night, after all the guests had left and the family had gone to bed, Vincent and Lila sat together in their bedroom, exhausted but happy. 50 years, Lila said, looking at the framed photograph from their wedding day that hung on the wall. "We were so young." "We were," Vincent agreed, "but we knew what we wanted." "We did, and we got it. All of it and more." They prepared for bed slowly, their movements careful now in deference to aging joints and tired muscles. But when they lay down together, as they had done for 50 years, Vincent pulled Lila close, and she rested her head on his shoulder just as she always had. "Good night, my love," Vincent whispered. "Good night," Lila replied. "I will see you in the morning." They drifted off to sleep together, content in the knowledge that tomorrow would bring more of the same blessings that had filled their lives for half a century. Vincent lived to be 76 years old. He died peacefully one spring morning, sitting in his favorite chair on the porch, watching the sunrise. Lila found him there, a slight smile on his face, as if he had seen something beautiful in those last moments. The grief was crushing. After more than 50 years together, Lila felt as though half of herself had been torn away, but she was surrounded by family, by the children and grandchildren who existed because of the love she and Vincent had shared. They held her up through the dark days, reminded her that Vincent lived on through all of them. At the funeral, Lila stood at the graveside and spoke about the man she had loved. "He was the best man I ever knew," she said, her voice steady despite her tears. "He saved my life, and then he spent the rest of his life making sure it was a life worth saving. I will miss him every day until we meet again." In the months that followed, Lila adjusted to life alone. It was not easy, but she found purpose in her grandchildren and in maintaining the traditions she and Vincent had established. She still sat on the porch every evening, though now she sat alone. But she never felt truly alone. Vincent's presence was everywhere, in the ranch he had built, in the family they had raised, in the very air she breathed. Matthew and Catherine convinced Lila to move into a smaller house they built on the property, closer to them, so they could keep an eye on her. She agreed, understanding that her children needed to care for her the way she had once cared for them. Lila lived another 8 years after Vincent's death. She saw her grandchildren grow into adults, start families of their own. She held great-grandchildren in her arms and marveled at the continuation of the legacy she and Vincent had started. One evening, as summer faded into fall, Lila sat on the porch of her small house and felt a strange peace settle over her. She thought about her life, about the journey from Kansas to New Mexico, about the moment Vincent had found her by the well. She thought about all the years that had followed, the joys and sorrows, the ordinary miracles of everyday life. She thought about Vincent, about his smile, his strength, his unwavering love. She missed him with an ache that had never diminished, but she also felt grateful for every moment they had shared. That night, Lila died quietly in her sleep. The family found her the next morning, looking peaceful, a slight smile on her face, much like Vincent had worn. On her nightstand was an old photograph, creased and faded, of 2 young people on their wedding day, their whole lives ahead of them. They buried Lila next to Vincent on a hill overlooking the ranch. The whole family gathered, along with what seemed like half of New Mexico. People spoke about Lila's kindness, her skill with a needle, her quiet strength. But mostly they spoke about the love between her and Vincent, a love that had become legendary in its own way. Sarah stood at her mother's grave and thought about the stories she had been told all her life, about how her father had found her mother dying in the desert, about how he had carried her to water and shade, about how that single act of compassion had led to everything that came after. She looked around at her family, at her children and grandchildren, at her brother and his family. She looked out over the ranch, still thriving, still bearing the Zeller name. All of it, every bit of it, had started with her father's decision to stop and help a stranger. That evening, as the sun set over the New Mexico landscape, the family gathered at the ranch house. The grandchildren, now adults with children of their own, shared stories about Vincent and Lila. They talked about their grandfather's wisdom and their grandmother's warmth. They talked about the legacy of love and hard work that had been passed down through the generations. Young Vincent, Matthew's son, now a man of 30 running much of the ranch's operations, raised a glass. "To my grandparents," he said, "who showed us all what it means to build something lasting, what it means to love completely, what it means to save someone, and to be saved in return." Everyone raised their glasses and echoed the toast. Outside, the stars began to appear in the darkening sky, the same stars that Vincent and Lila had watched together for so many years. The ranch continued to prosper in the years that followed. The Zeller family remained stewards of the land, treating it with respect, maintaining the values Vincent had instilled from the very beginning. New generations were born, grew up hearing the story of how it all started, of the cowboy who found a woman dying by a well and carried her to water and shade. And in that story, in that single act of compassion that had bloomed into a lifetime of love, the family found their foundation. They understood that everything they had, everything they were, came from the decision two people had made to love each other against all odds, to build something together in the wilderness, to hold on tight and never let go. The ranch house still stood on the hill, weathered but strong, just like the love that had built it. And on quiet evenings when the wind blew just right, you could almost imagine two figures sitting on the porch, hand in hand, watching the sunset and counting their blessings. Two people who had found each other in the harshest of circumstances and turned that meeting into something beautiful, something eternal, something that would last long after they were gone. Their love story had started with water and shade in the burning desert. It had grown through years of hard work and dedication. It had been tested by drought and loss and the countless small trials of everyday life. And it had endured, stronger than steel, deeper than any well, more vital than water itself. In the end, that was the legacy Vincent and Lila Zeller left behind. Not just a successful ranch or a large family, but the knowledge that true love, the kind that saves and sustains, is possible. The two strangers can meet in the most unlikely way and build something that echoes through generations. That compassion and courage and commitment can transform not just individual lives, but entire families, entire communities. The story of the cowboy who found the woman by the well became part of New Mexico folklore, told and retold, slightly different each time but always with the same heart. And in every telling, the message remained the same, that sometimes the most important moment of your life comes when you stop to help someone else, when you offer water and shade to a stranger, when you choose kindness over convenience. Vincent and Lila's story had a beginning by that dried-up well, but it never really had an ending. It lived on in their children and grandchildren and great-grandchildren. It lived on in the ranch that still bore their name. It lived on in the values they had instilled, the love they had shared, the example they had set. And somewhere, perhaps in the wind that swept across the New Mexico landscape, in the stars that shone over the ranch at night, in the very earth that had witnessed their love story unfold, Vincent and Lila were together still. Two souls who had found each other against all odds and had loved each other with everything they had. Two people who had proven that the greatest adventures, the deepest joys, the most profound meanings come not from grand gestures, but from simple acts of caring, from choosing to stop, to help, to love. Their story was complete, their circle closed, their legacy secure. They had lived fully, loved deeply, and left behind something far greater than themselves. And in the quiet moments, when the family gathered at the ranch and shared stories of those who had come before, Vincent and Lila were there too, in every word, every memory, every beat of every heart that carried their blood. The cowboy had found her lying by a well that had gone dry. He had carried her to water and shade, and in doing so, he had found his own salvation, his own purpose, his own eternal love. It was a simple story in many ways, but it was also everything. It was the story of two lives joined into one, of love conquering hardship, of family and legacy and enduring devotion. And it was a story that would never truly end, as long as there were people to remember it, to honor it, to live by its example. Vincent and Lila Zeller had built something that would last forever, not in stone or steel, but in the hearts of all those who knew them and all those who would come after. Their love was their monument, their family was their masterpiece, and their story was their gift to the world.